Well, welcome everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Kashmir Massacre, and I want to introduce a new idea to you about what is going on over there. So on the 22nd of April, the Pahalgam massacre, which is the village of shepherds, he was the victim of an attack, and 26 victims were mostly tourists. One of them was an operator of the tourist resort. This event took place at around 3 p.m. according to the New York Post. And I just want to highlight some of the details of this event because it's a really important event since it has led to a war between India and Pakistan. There are some inconsistencies in this attack, but first of all, I want to discuss why we need to talk about this. So, as you know, very quickly after, it was identified by India that the neighboring country was the perpetrator. And this is something that's had already very big consequences. And I just want to point out how right now, no independent investigation has been done. Even though Pakistan, Malaysia, and China have asked for it, CNBC has said Malaysia asked for it, China has asked for it, like very quickly after, they all said, please, let's investigate by a neutral party to find out who did it. AJ said India has rejected this proposal, this request. And we have to ask ourselves, who would do such a thing? I'm not saying it's not possible that Pakistan did it. I'm not saying it's not possible that any other party did it. I'm just saying let's look at the available facts and find out who committed such a huge atrocity, which could lead to the deaths of millions of people if we look at these type of attacks in the past, like what they've meant for the world. And so one thing I think is very important to note, India didn't take a lot of time to respond to the attack. Within a few hours even, I mean, at 3 p.m., the attack took place, and around 6:30, the prime minister immediately tweeted there was an evil agenda behind the attack. And he said, literally, our resolve to fight terrorism is unshakable and it will get even stronger. By saying something like this, he implies several things. The first thing is it had to do with the fight against terrorism. So according to him, it couldn't have been an incident where, for example, someone with like mental issues has taken action against people they disliked, or any type of individual reasoning for doing such a thing, which happens quite often in the world. He said there was an evil agenda, but he also said that their fight against terrorism is unshakable and will get even stronger. And here he also implies that they were already fighting terrorism and that it would only become stronger. And so if you look at the past of India and the terrorist attacks they experienced, especially in the region, one notable attack would be of 2019, where a group which was based in Pakistan or had ties with Pakistan claimed the attack. So by reading this, you could say that there is already an implication of Pakistan. I think this was a incredibly weird thing to say because Modi took 3.5 hours to investigate the unalivings of what AJ called, Al Jazeera called the biggest attack in 25 years. And he managed to find the perpetrator in 3.5 hours. So they weren't able to prevent the attack. They weren't able to gather intelligence to prevent it, but they were able, within 3.5 hours of it taking place, to find out who it was. You have to understand there are several things about this attack that were already very questionable. One of them is that 45 minutes later, after the attack happened, the authorities arrived. So you could say that, the first 45 minutes of this attack, they weren't even there. Then they would have an hour and let's say 2 hours and 45 minutes to find out the perpetrator, and then he was already ready to make a public claim. This reeks of something is not going well here. Something is being hidden, and a neutral investigation is needed. But that unfortunately has been rejected, as I mentioned, which has been reported by Al Jazeera. And so let's take a look at the region we're talking about, okay? Because that's also something that's really important. So we're talking about the dispute in Kashmir, where a border was drawn by the ex-colonizer of India, Britain, and they drew a border which wasn't very beneficial because the people who lived in that area didn't agree with it. And so many conflicts arise after, and it used to be kind of like an autonomous state. It isn't anymore, but many, let's say, human rights violations have happened over the past decades, okay? And so I think it's really important to divide the human rights violations in pre-2019 and post-2019, and then post 22nd of April, because before 2019, the situation was already really bad. But in 2019, another attack was committed in this area and it actually made it worse. So what was already going on in 2019? That's the question. Okay. So UN actually wrote reports about it. In 2018, Human Rights Watch wrote about it. And they said that at the time, the Indian authorities, they used excessive force against the population by security forces. They also said that there was no legal immunity to the security forces who would commit these crimes against civilians, allowing them to act without accountability. So you have to see it like this. They have an army, you could say. They're terrorizing the civilians and they are not being held accountable. They can do whatever they want. Okay. So no justice for the victims of human rights violations. People are disappearing and there are no credible investigations and even sexual violence cases against civilians, and those are not being researched at all. Okay. And then there is detention without trial, including of children, for up to 2 years. And there are also widespread communication blockades, including mobile and internet shutdowns, and restricted forms of expression. So you can say the journalists are not able to express their right to share their opinion and to share news with the world. And education is already not fully accessible due to curfew strikes and attacks on schools. And so this is in 2018. Then in 2019, a terrorist attack takes place in Pulwama. And apparently this was claimed by a Pakistani-based group, according to the Times of India. And what's interesting, though, that LA Times, they published that there were many things about how this attack was portrayed that were false. And I will tell you some things about it. Like, they had a lot of fake images that were used when reporting terror of this attack. There were images of the war in Iraq. They had images of attacks in Syria, and mainstream media, including television, were spreading these fake images. I mean, it would even go as far as showing videos of a video game which supposedly were fighter jets destroying a target. I've seen the video. It's online. And even credible TV channels were showing these fake images and videos. And after this attack took place, there were many policies accepted and many legislations to make sure that they could further increase the surveillance of the Jammu and Kashmir state, because actually that's what it's called, Jammu and Kashmir, and making it a police state, basically, which it already was, but it was just made worse. And it's very well known that also they changed the status of the region because it was no longer autonomous. They revoked Article 370, which was that it was an autonomous place. And so afterwards, the Indian officials would also give interviews about how beneficial it was for India India and the safety of India that they revoked the 370 article. And I mean, even the Home Minister Shah, he highlighted that there had been a reduction of over 70% of terrorist incidents. And he said it proved that the abrogation of Article 370 was actually much needed because according to him, it was a facilitator of terrorism. Okay. So you have to understand this is the reason why the attack in 2019 was very beneficial, and it led to many offenses afterwards that it could also explain why the attack happened now. Okay, I'm just going to give you an overview of how the situation got worse, but if you follow this situation, you'd probably already know. But in 2024, Human Rights Watch again, they wrote an article about the situation of the Kashmiris, and they said there had been a surge in attacks, particularly in Jammu, leading to the deaths of soldiers and civilians. At this point, journalists and activists would get arrested, and high-profile arrests of journalists and human rights defenders would also be made. So if you would try to defend the people of Kashmir, you would be locked up. Then journalists would also face police harassment, threats, and legal action. And there was also policy introduced in 2020, making it easier to censor the news. Okay. And in 2024, there were more of these types of policies installed. And there was the Public Safety Act, which has been used to, detain individuals without a trial, even after the court had demanded their release. In Kashmir, now in 2024, people were being held in custody. Okay, so then you already get an idea of the level of oppression in Kashmir. The law had been used to prolong detentions, so it wasn't just 2 years. Now we're having longer detentions as well. And they also had the longest internet shut down in any democracy in the world in Kashmir, the longest internet shutdown in Kashmir in 2019 and 2021, lasting over 500 days. Can you imagine what this means to education, to work, to the safety of people? And so the shutdown, severely impacted daily life, even the medical field, communication and economy, obviously. The Indian authorities have frequently used internet shutdowns as a tool of control, which has led for UN to also call for, stopping this, stop the communication blockades. So now you can imagine, the timeline. We've had pre-2019, before the Pulwama attack. Then after the Pulwama attack, they obviously cracked down on all of these policies, more surveillance, more military, more stricter punishment for the people of Kashmir. Now we've had another attack in 2025. What has it meant so far? It's been a couple of weeks. It's not even been, it's maybe been 2 weeks. At most 2.5 weeks. What have they already done? So according to BBC, Kashmiris are harassed all over the country at this point. They are being assaulted by their radicalized and hateful peers. Security forces in Kashmir have detained thousands of people. Like, let's say we have 14 days after this event happened, and already thousands of people have been detained. Like, are they rounding up hundreds of people per day? Like, what is going off? They've shut off more than 50 tourist destinations. Okay. They're bringing down the economy of Kashmir as we speak. And they sent in additional army and paramilitary troops and blown up several homes belonging to families of suspected people. So how is this a democracy? Where is the division of the legal system and the executive system and the policymakers? Is the army the one who decides whether someone is guilty or not for them to blow up a home? Like, what happened to Trias Politica? What happened to that? Like, this is not the behavior of a democracy. And so India, I mean, I am very disappointed to hear that. I mean, I have roots in India and I am super concerned. I have been very concerned over the past years. Like, obviously, I mean, I've thought about going there and, I don't know, just experiencing the country, but, wearing hijab and just hearing how they treat Muslims now in general. Like, I've been a bit scared. But after hearing this, I'm like, I don't even want to go there. Like, I think it's so wrong the way they're treating these people, especially the Kashmiris. Like, forget everyone else in other parts of the world. Like, the way I just described what's been going on pre 2019, after 2019, in the past few weeks, like, I mean, I have no choice but to say, like, this literally sounds like Palestine. And I do feel really bad, because I feel like I'm one of those people who didn't know enough about Kashmir. And I feel really guilty because, like, look at what's been happening to them. Like, not even now. This has been happening for a long time. And I've always talked about Palestine. Like, I've worked with Palestine for years. Like, I've promoted them in all my work in the media. Like, I feel so bad about it, And I think, I mean, not to make an excuse, but I think it's because, like, where I used to live, like, I used to live in Europe. It's just not that big in the news. Like, Palestine might be more in the news because I guess there's more people who are Muslim who have maybe Arab roots, and there's not a lot of people who are like Indian who have Muslim roots in the Netherlands. Anyways, it's no excuse. I feel really bad. I'm also very sorry, and obviously I'm gonna try to make it up. I'm gonna try to talk about it. I'm gonna try to explain the situation, and I'm always gonna try to, like, keep bringing it up wherever I am, okay, inshallah, because I feel really bad about it. Okay, you might wonder now, okay, like, okay, so no independent investigation has been done. No, India rejects that. Pakistan wants that to happen. Malaysia wants that to happen. China wants it to happen. The international community would love for it to happen, although UN hasn't called for it, but, like, that's not at all a surprise. But I mean, I would love for it to happen. Like, all we have right now is just our own, like, I guess, research and everything we can find online to make a case for why this needs to end and why it's can have huge catastrophic consequences if it keeps going on. And that's why I've researched this since the war started, but to me, this is a bit deeper than that because I would say there is a reason to believe that there are other countries who are involved. And my own observation after reading a lot is that Israel could be involved in this situation. And I'm going to explain to you why. So you might wonder, like, how could Israel be a part of this? Where do they even come in? Well, you need to look a little bit further than today, I mean, Israel has had a strong presence in India for many decades. They've had a strong presence inside Kashmir, but also nearby Kashmir. And I'm just going to present some information which is publicly available for decades. For 3 decades, Israel has had entire towns in India. Nobody talks about this, but very near where the attacks happened, there are actually Israeli towns. And these towns are located in Himachal Pradesh, which is bordering to Kashmir. And there are towns called Kasul and Dharamkot, according to the Hindustan Times, which are also better known actually as Little Israel and the hills of Tel Aviv. Mini Israel, yeah. I mean, it's a place, according to even their own news outlets, where IDF soldiers go after they've been part of the IDF. And what's reported by Times of Israel is that they've been there for 3 decades. They don't mix with the locals. And also they have their own establishments, like they own a lot of places there. It's been reported even by their own media that some of these establishments are whites only. So that means that Indian people couldn't even enter if they wanted to. I've known about this since last year, October, because one of my friends is from Kashmir, and I once saw a creator. His name is Eric Hakim, who spoke about it. And I thought that was really like mind blowing. And when I started researching it for this episode, I was actually really surprised because you know that the attack happened in the village of the shepherds, right? And in the village of the shepherds, there are also people who are called the Gadi people. They live in Himachal Pradesh and Jammu and Kashmir in India. And the Gadi people, they are known as the shepherd people. And it's really interesting because the village of shepherds was also the one attacked. But basically, Israel also has a presence in Himachal Pradesh, where you have these same people who are also in Kashmir. But they've kind of been pushed out of the area. The area is like heavily Israeli. I mean, even the road signs are Israeli. The people speak Israeli. You know, some of the restaurants are not even accessible for the people who live there. So you could say that the indigenous people are kind of being kicked out. And I think this is incredibly odd. I don't know if it's a coincidence that in Kashmir, there's also these people. But when I started researching this topic again because of the events that have happened, I was actually shocked by the following. Because 2 days after the Kashmir attacks, one of the chief ministers, the chief minister of tourism of another state, Jharkhand, he actually called for the resignation for the chief minister of Himachal Pradesh. And so he is the chief minister who governs these Israeli towns. And so an attack happens in Kashmir. They're talking about who should take the blame. And so this fellow Indian chief minister is saying that the person who governs the Israeli towns in India should take the blame. Honestly, when I found out about this, I was like shocked, but okay. I couldn't believe it. And it's like, especially since whatever is going on, obviously in the Middle East is already implicating that, you know, the Israelis are, you know, committing war crimes, committing a genocide. So for them now in India, also, being the ones who, you know, live in this state where the chief minister is supposed to take the blame for an attack that happened in Kashmir, which is a place that resembles Palestine in a very heavy way. I'm sorry, mind blown. Okay. So anyways, what I also thought was interesting that this tourist destination in Himachal Pradesh, where, you know, you have all these Israeli towns within days of the Kashmir attack happening, was being promoted as the safe alternative to the crisis of Kashmir. And so there is especially there's this website called Travel and Tour World, which is an Indian website who talks about all these amazing places. And they were immediately saying, well, you know what? If you don't want to go to Kashmir anymore because it's such a crisis, you know, because of the dangers and everything, you should now go to Himachal Pradesh. And I was like, wow, isn't that a coincidence? And so this is something I'm not surprised by, but in a way I was a little bit surprised. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I'm not going to lie. Because like, you know, all over the internet, if you Google these two places, Himachal Pradesh and Kashmir, there's always been this feud about who is more popular. And it's always been Kashmir is heaven on earth. Like nothing is more popular. And then this happened. And then immediately people are like, okay, let's go there. And who's going to benefit from it? The Israeli-owned establishments. Okay. Anyways, that's number one. Then I have reason number two, why I think Israel could be involved in these attacks, in the Kashmir attacks. So apparently during the Pahalgam attack, the security was breached. Okay. And guess who designs its security hardware? Israel. And so, you know, according to Business Today, there were security lapses. Security forces were not informed that this place even opened up. So you have to understand, Kashmir is basically a police state, but the security forces didn't even know that this entire resort was operating and running. It took 45 minutes for the authorities to arrive after the attack, so there was no protocol in place, or it was not even being followed. Like, it does not make sense. And so, according to the Diplomat, the influence of Israeli hardware and, military equipment is heavy in India. And so I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview, because after the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, Israel and India tightened their bond, and they were gonna work together more closely. And in the past decade, India has imported $2.9 billion worth of equipment from Israel. So you have to understand that. We're talking about radars, surveillance, combat drones, and missiles. Okay, but that's not everything. I mean, the collaboration between Israel and India started to control Kashmir. It started in the 1990s. Like, this is not a recent thing. Like, this has been happening for decades. Okay, so you can understand, like, these Israeli towns are established over there. All of a sudden, the collaboration between Israel and India also intensifies in the 1990s, and they start working together on how to control Kashmir. Like, they basically seeked Israel's expertise in training and security. And it's even been found by Jane's Terrorism and Security Monitor that Israel is actively involved in training Indian counterinsurgency forces. Israel's expertise in UAV technology, so these are unarmed aviation thingies. They actually are enhancing India's surveillance capabilities in critical regions like Kashmir. So they're basically just being watched by Israeli hardware all the time. Isn't that interesting? Okay, well, then we've had that, but it just doesn't just stay with the hardware. I mean, even when it comes to the software, Israel is involved. And like, there's been a huge case, according to Al Jazeera, invasive Israeli spyware named Pegasus has been used in India to gather intel from high-profile journalists, from activists, in Indian society. And so this is huge. Amnesty has reported on it. They've been sued many times. You can find it out. Even Meta sued them because they were using WhatsApp to do these, spy missions. And so we can confidently say that they were not only involved, Israel was not only involved in the hardware that controls Kashmir, they're also involved in the software that is taking over the phones and the intelligence of Indian society, which is really important if you want to fight terrorism or if you want to participate in terrorism. Anyways, okay, basically, after the attacks happened, another thing which I thought was so weird, which I've not seen before, is that all of a sudden, India has a huge influence on all the big media outlets, like social media. I'm just going to talk about social media right now. I've seen accounts being threatened, like family members of the Bhutto family, Mohammed Hijab. I've seen like regular Instagram accounts, like Muslim, who has like millions of followers, who've been blocked and banned. And I mean, according to news outlets in India, thousands of accounts have been blocked, especially the ones who are talking about what might have really happened, Pakistani accounts most likely. I do think that, as a democracy, this is unacceptable. If you don't want to be democracy, you don't have to be democracy, like that's the message I think India really needs to take. But to then shut down social media worldwide, because like even in Canada, people from Canada cannot watch certain accounts. For example, the Muslim account cannot be viewed in Canada. Like, what does Canada even have to do with it? But I don't even know, but like, I'll tell you one thing, like this is reeking of Israeli influence, because if we know one thing after the Palestine situation is that social media has been complicit and so in this situation as well. So that's nothing new. Then I would say another thing which Honestly, it's pretty ridiculous. But the same model Israel uses with Palestine, where they sexualize women to get the favor of the public, they're using it in Kashmir as well. They're using it in India, to be more specific, because, Israel is known to use women bodies to, appeal to the viewer. And so especially to the Western world, they know that if the women are, in glam makeup, dancing, revealing outfits, that they'll get a lot of popularity in the West. And so this has been studied. Actual universities have studied this for decades. Okay. Like this is a known fact. And, one of those universities was a Canadian university, and research has been published in Media, War and Conflict in 2011. They were looking at how Israel was sexualizing women in the Lebanon War in 2006. And basically what they call these women who are doing I would say dirty work, is combat cuties. So the women are like really propped up to be like appealing to the men. Like, I just have so many things to say about it. But okay, anyways. And the idea, I saw some Reddit speaking about it. Like, what is the idea behind it? And they said that it's selling images of empowered and independent women, because obviously when your body becomes public goods, you are an independent woman. And they would say that they did it to show the world that the status of the Arab woman is obviously very sad compared to the Israeli woman who is like using her body to get men to like her. Okay. Anyways, I didn't know it worked like that. But basically, India is doing the same thing. I saw it this morning. So Times of India, they reported that this colonel called Sophia Qureshi of the Indian Army, that she was, briefing the world about what is happening. And obviously they chose a Muslim woman. But another thing that was very noticeable is that she was in full glam makeup. Like sis got her team to make sure her eyelashes were on fleek. Her cat wing was on fleek. Like sis was wearing like a completely fitted outfit. Like it was distasteful. I'm not gonna lie. I felt like, why would you do that to yourself? Like you're in a serious position. You have serious things to talk about. You don't need a smoky eye. You don't need a smoky eye to make your point. Like, girl, make your point. Like, why are you using your body here? And like, I understand that if the idea is to make Muslim women like me bad, that you would want to be like, oh, look at her, she's so sad, she cannot use like a smoky eyeshadow to, I don't know, get the favor of men worldwide who are lusting over her body. Stop. Like, please, if you're gonna copy anything of Israel, let it not be that. Like, that is literally the most, like, it's just like, it's morally corrupt. It's like morally bankrupt to use the bodies of women to win a war. I'm disgusted. I want to make you aware of one thing. Like there's a US-based charity and they are called the Kashmir Awareness Charity, and it's a nonprofit, and they've actually written an article about the presence of a military base owned by Israelis in 2019. So they were saying 6 years ago that there's already military bases run by Israelis in Kashmir, which is incredibly dangerous. And so as a closing note, I just want to say the following to you, okay? Look, to me, this massacre is giving 9/11 vibes. I was 12 years old when 9/11 happened. Okay. I couldn't do anything. Like I've given presentations about why it was a false flag mission since I was 12 in high school. But ever since that took place, like more than 4 million people have died as a result of the wars that have taken place after 9/11. And this has been researched by Brown University. 9/11 led to more than 4.5 million deaths. Okay. $14 trillion has been spent on the military industry, of which 7 trillion went to private companies. I'm talking about Boeing. I'm talking about Lockheed Martin. I'm talking about BlackRock, which have all been heavily involved with Israel. Their executives have very strong ties or are Israeli. Okay. And I just want you to be aware, so many different countries have been affected: Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Pakistan, Libya, and Somalia. And over 38 million people have been displaced. as a result of 9/11. This could be a new 9/11. The reason that Asia is gonna be full of war caused by Israel, okay? And I want you to be aware of that. I don't know who is involved. Like, I just know, like, 2.5 decades after 9/11 happened, like, I'm not that little girl anymore. I'm gonna speak up because I believe it's the right thing to do. You know, I've dedicated my entire life to speaking about the marginalization of groups of people in society. I've gotten a master's degree in political science so I could do the work I do today. I've worked with the International Criminal Court, United Nations, the US State Department. I've worked with organizations who are dealing with the prohibition of nuclear weapons and chemical weapons, because I don't want these things to happen. I don't know who's involved really, but I do know that there's a lot of research, there's a lot of evidence pointing in the direction of Israel. And if you are in any way being propped up or funded by them and you know that this is the truth, I really do urge you to come forward and tell the world what is happening so that not again more than 4 million people will lose their lives because of this. That's all I wanted to say for today. Thank you everyone for watching. I'll be back next week, and I hope you all will do your best to spread the truth, to urge your governments and the people around you to not choose violence, but to choose peace, and to say no against organizations and countries who are trying to increase their rule and power in these parts of the world. Thank you so much.